The first secondary stream is the hardest one to build. Most people know this going in. The early stage is fragile, the returns are small, the effort per dollar is high, the compounding is invisible. What most people don't anticipate is what happens after. After the first stream stabilizes, after it begins to produce consistently, after the early stage is through and the thing actually holds. What happens next is not what the plan assumed. What happens is comfort. The first stream succeeds, not dramatically, not at a scale that changes everything overnight, but it produces. It's real. It exists outside the primary income. It represents something built, something that wasn't there before. And that feeling, the feeling of having built something, is significant enough to become its own anchor. The first stream becomes the proof that building is possible, the evidence that the system works, the thing pointed to when the question is asked, "What have I built outside my job?" And that proof, that evidence, that thing, becomes something to protect. Not to build from, to protect, which is the beginning of the first stream becoming the last stream. The comfort zone of the first stream has a specific structure. The stream is now familiar. The work required to maintain it is known. The returns are predictable. The risk feels managed. Starting a second stream means leaving that familiarity, returning to the early stage, accepting small returns again, high effort per dollar again, invisible compounding again. After having moved past all of that with the first stream, returning to it feels like regression, not progress, not the next step in a sequence, a step backward. And so, the second stream keeps being deferred, until the first stream is larger, until the conditions are better, until something shifts that makes starting again feel less like going back to zero. That shift rarely comes on its own, because the first stream is a self-reinforcing comfort zone. The more time spent inside it, the more familiar it becomes. The more familiar it becomes, the more starting something new feels like a disruption rather than a progression. And the gap between where the first stream is and where the second stream would start feels larger with each passing month, not smaller. Not because the starting point of the second stream has actually moved, because the comfort level inside the first has increased. And comfort doesn't produce movement. It produces maintenance. This is why most people who successfully build a first secondary stream never build a second. Not because they failed, not because the system didn't work, because the first stream succeeded just enough to become a new version of the same dependency, a better dependency, a more diversified one that produces something outside the primary source, but still a comfort zone, still a ceiling, still a position that feels secure enough to make the next move feel unnecessary. Until it isn't. Until the first stream disrupts, or the primary income disrupts, or the realization arrives that two sources were always the plan, not the destination. Before this continues, if you felt seen instead of sold to, that's the entire point of Relentless Wealth. Like the video, subscribe. We're just getting started. The transition from one income stream to multiple isn't primarily about finding the next idea. Ideas are rarely the constraint. Most people who have successfully built one secondary stream can identify several things they could potentially build next. The constraint isn't imagination, it's recognition. Specifically, recognizing when the first stream has stabilized enough to actually free capacity for the next. Stabilization has a specific meaning here. It doesn't mean the first stream is producing at its full potential. It doesn't mean it requires no attention. It doesn't mean it has reached whatever scale was originally imagined. It means the first stream is no longer in the early stage. It's no longer fragile, no longer dependent on concentrated input to avoid collapsing, no longer requiring the same intensity it needed to get through the beginning. It runs with maintenance input rather than development input. And that distinction between development input and maintenance input is where the capacity for the next stream actually comes from. Development input is intensive. The early stage of any income stream requires focused, sustained effort over a concentrated period. Building the structure, establishing the system, getting through the fragile phase where it could stall or collapse if the input drops. Maintenance input is different. Once the structure exists, once the system runs, the input required to keep it producing is substantially less than what was required to build it. And that freed input, that difference between what the first stream needed to develop and what it now needs to maintain, is the capacity available for the second stream. Not time created from nothing, not energy manufactured. Capacity freed by the first stream moving from development to maintenance. The transition requires one more thing beyond recognizing stabilization. It requires resisting the instinct to reinvest the freed capacity back into the first stream. Because the first stream is familiar. Because more input into the first stream produces visible results in a known system. Because improving what already exists feels safer than starting something new. And so the freed capacity often gets absorbed by the first stream instead of directed toward the second. The first stream gets better, more developed, more optimized. But the second stream never starts, and the architecture stays at one secondary source instead of moving toward two. The transition requires a deliberate decision, not a feeling, not a moment of readiness, not a sign that conditions are right. A deliberate decision that the first stream has stabilized, that its maintenance input is less than its development input was, and that the difference will go toward the second stream. Starting now. Not when the first stream is larger, not when conditions improve, not when the second idea feels more certain. When the first stream holds. That's the transition point. And the people who move past the first secondary stream are almost always the ones who make that decision deliberately, rather than waiting for the moment to feel right on its own. The plan going in almost never matches what actually develops. Most people who set out to build multiple income streams have a sequence in mind, a logical progression, a clear order, a set of positions that make sense together, that feel like they'll build neatly toward a coherent structure. And then, reality engages with the plan. The first stream develops differently than expected, slower in some ways, faster in others, in a direction slightly different from where it was pointed. And the plan starts to bend. This is structurally normal. Compounding income structures don't develop linearly. They develop through feedback, through the actual experience of building. What works, what doesn't, what produces more than expected, what produces less, and the adjustments that experience forces. The plan provides direction. The feedback provides correction. And the correction usually points somewhere different from where the plan assumed. Not wrong, different. And the people who compound successfully are the ones who follow the correction rather than the original plan when the two diverge. What this means in practice is that the second stream rarely turns out to be what was planned when the first stream started. The first stream reveals something, about where leverage actually exists in the current position, about what skills produce more value than expected, about what markets respond to what the first stream was building. And the second stream often grows from that revealed information, not from the original plan. Which means the architecture of multiple streams tends to be more coherent than it appeared going in, but less coherent to the original vision, less planned, more compounded, more responsive to what the building process actually revealed. There's a longer pattern worth naming. Over a 10-year horizon, the income structure that develops almost never looks like what was imagined at the start. Not because the vision was wrong, because compounding doesn't follow visions. It follows feedback. It follows what works. It follows what the market or the asset or the system actually responds to. And the structure that emerges from that process is usually more specific, more leveraged, more aligned with actual capability and position than anything that could have been planned before the building began. This is why the roadmap framing for income diversification consistently misleads people. A roadmap implies a known path, a fixed sequence, a plan that holds from start to finish. But compounding income structures don't follow fixed paths. They follow feedback loops. They develop through building, learning, adjusting, and building again from a slightly different position. The people who compound successfully don't follow the plan rigidly. They start with a direction. They build the first stream. They follow what the first stream reveals. They start the second stream from the corrected position. And they keep following the feedback, adjusting the structure as it develops until what exists is something the original plan never could have specified, but something that compounds in exactly the direction it needed to. If this shifted something for you, subscribe. Like this if it clarified something.